Hello, everyone. I think we're live now. So welcome to Ask the Expert, digitally transform an essential part of your organization, the Firstline Workforce. This is the follow-up session to digitally transform an essential part of your organization, the Firstline Workforce digital breakout session. We're going to be talking about the Firstline Workforce and all about how we can enable them to be more productive and more capable than ever with the technology from Microsoft and from our partners as well. So today we're going to go ahead and kick off, but before we do, I wanted to quickly just set up some house rules and how to engage with our experts. So please do use the chat to ask questions. The chat's going to be available, and we've got moderators from around the world as well as online to be able to answer those questions for you. Questions will appear to all the attendees at once they're approved by the moderator, and so everyone will get to see it. You're going to want to make sure that the questions that you like the best, you upvote using the thumbs up button, so that way you can make sure that the questions that you want to make are answered show up on screen. And then our experts will be answering questions verbally and over chat, and I'll be taking a look at the questions and making sure that we route them appropriately based off of what our experts' expertise is. And by the last thing here, experts will provide resources once the session is concluded to learn more. We've got a whole bunch of resources and assets that we're looking forward to sharing with you as part of this. And with that, we'll share a little bit of etiquette about how we're going to go ahead and do this. The session is going to be recorded. Just want to make sure everyone understands. In order to make sure that our moderators have the best way possible to get the questions to our experts, please do not spam or post inappropriate comments into the chat. And again, we're going to make sure that we're adhering to the Microsoft Code of Conduct, which I'll display on screen here as part of our event. And with that, we're going to go ahead and kick off by introducing our experts. What I would love to do is introduce the team here, starting with Mike. And if you could just do me a favor and say who you are, what you do, and what do you do at Microsoft, and what type of questions you're looking forward to answering. And Mike, we'll start with you.
Great, thanks, Abid. Good morning and good afternoon to folks joining on this event with us. My name is Mayank Verma, and I lead the product marketing team for Microsoft 365 Firstline Solutions, and I'll be able to help take questions on your Firstline Workers strategy, your questions around the products spanning from Microsoft Teams, which is where we are seeing the most amount of usage right now, but also getting into like security, compliance, identity, shared devices, or if you have questions on some of our specific device partnerships that we announced this week. So really happy to be on this call, and back to you, Abid.
Great, and Lindsay.
Sorry about that. There's a little bit of a delay. Thanks, Abid. My name is Lindsay Gardner. I'm a product marketing manager on the Firstline go-to-market team, and I'm really excited to take questions this evening around key trends that are taking place in the Firstline workforce and some priority needs that Firstline employees have, and how we can really optimize their productivity in this new normal as we face.
Thank you so much, Lindsay. And hi, Zoe.
Hey, Abid. So I am also a product marketing manager for Firstline Workers. I focus on Teams, and I'm really excited to talk about Teams from a product point of view, as well as any customer stories to help really land what other people are doing during this time.
Great, thanks so much, Zoe. And along with the team, I'll also be answering questions based around anything related to Firstline devices and how we can use them in industry scenarios. And so we're looking forward to doing that. Now, let's go ahead and kick off with our questions. There's actually a lot of questions already in the queue. What I wanted to do was start off with a question that came in right in the beginning, which I think, Mayank, would be great for you. It is, how do you define digital transformation from the lens of a Firstline worker?
Great. Thanks, Abid. And I think that's a really, really important question right now, especially looking at the times that we are all living in with the pandemic worldwide, and the fact that there was a shutdown that happened suddenly in most of the countries. And if you look at what happened to the Firstline user base, and for folks who are joining us new on this call, in the Firstline category is also commonly known as the frontline workers in the industry. It's a very common phenomenon right now that the frontline workers are disconnected because companies got shut down, the economy got shut down, and there's a disconnect that customers are facing across their workforce. So with respect to digital transformation, the most common scenario that we are seeing right now is the need for secure communications. That's the most common ask we are seeing from most of our customers who are looking for solutions that they can stand up really quick in just a matter of a couple of days that can actually bring their first-line workers on the same platform so that they can securely communicate with the rest of the organization. In addition to this, there are other scenarios that are coming up a lot depending on what kind of customer and what industry. But other notable examples are things like business processes, especially in the case of first-line workers, processes like shift management and task management are really important because first-line workers mostly work on shifts. A notable example that we spoke about this week at Ignite is Alcoa from Iceland, where they have been actually able to use Microsoft 365 and Teams to actually change their shifts from 8 hours to a 12-hour shift just within 3 days. That wouldn't have been possible without a Microsoft 365 based solution for the first line base. So tremendous opportunities depending on who we are looking at, spanning from retail, manufacturing, going into healthcare, public sector, and definitely a lot that's also coming up this week. And I'm sure we'll talk a lot through this session on announcements from Ignite and what we are bringing to market with our partnerships with some of our device partners such as Samsung. Back to you, Abid.
Great. Hey, Mike, thanks so much. That's a great answer. Hey, Lindsay, a question came through that I think would be great for you. It's while first-line workers focus on keeping the lights on, can you share any good tips on how to increase engagement with this group when it comes to things like digital training?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So one of the key trends that all first-line workers across organizations and industries are facing is this increased need for communication and connection. In current times, it's really exposed the gaps between corporate communications and their first-line workforce, who are often spread out and disparate. And so a best practice when you're trying to really fill that gap and connect employees across offices, across sites, and across knowledge workers and first-line workers is inside of Teams. Very basic and easy. You create a Teams channel that all of the primary communications will go in, and then they can have instructions to pin that Teams channel at the top of their feed. So they will be sure not to miss any important communications, announcements, updates around perhaps a new protocol or procedure around cleaning. And it's a way for the employees to also feel like they have one central spot to go to feel reassured that they have the latest information, to not only ensure their safety, but also the safety of their colleagues and customers. So I would recommend this pin channel in Teams, where you can provide communications, updates, videos, files, etc.
Awesome, Lindsay. Hey, thanks so much. Hey, Zoe. So a question came in that I thought was interesting. That is something that we often have talked about internally that I'd love to get your insight on. So, are you finding that first-line leaders and first-line managers are actively participating in the development of workflows and apps, or is this something that's being handled mostly by IT departments? Oh, you're on mute, Zoe.
Whoops, someone had to do it. It's a great question. It's across the entire company we see these workflows being developed. Really, it can be your average field technician, which we saw a lot from Telstra as a customer coming through, or it can be from IT who's building out the problems that they're seeing or the specific line of business apps that they know their employees need. And we've also seen it from corporate as well to make sure that, like Lindsay said, there's the right training material. And so I've actually seen it at every level of the organization, which is part of the greatness of our platform, is that with the Power Platform, low code, no code solution, almost anyone can make the right workflow in order to satisfy business needs.
And that brings up, speaking about satisfying business needs, one thing that comes up often is how do we leverage Power Platform and Power Apps to be able to go and extend the ability for us to be able to do servicing at the shop floor level. Mayank, this question is for you. In manufacturing as well as other industries, we have many use cases for shop floor Power Apps, but can't afford to license thousands of hourly workers. What are some other ways to get them connected for use with Power Apps?
Yeah, that's a great question. Something that we are evaluating internally, as we look to simplify and our licensing for Firstline. We've actually made a lot of simplifications since the spring of this calendar year when we launched the new Microsoft 365 F1 SKU at a list price of $4 per user per month. And then we have a higher valued SKU, which is the F3 license, which is priced at $10 per user per month. This is a list price. And we are looking at some of the use cases. I think the question is probably based around how Power Platform is packaged. Right now, we are looking at Power Platform as a capability of our F3 solution based on user research and how we see customers using the solution. We are in active discussions to see if we can make it simpler for our customers who might be on a F1 license. We have nothing to share at this point in time, but the way you get access to Power Platform is through the F3 license, and depending on who the customer is, there might be a different pricing based on what geography you're in, or what your pricing waterfall looks like with Microsoft, depending on how many users you're licensing. So for details around that, I would encourage you to work with your Microsoft account teams if you're a managed customer, and if that's not the case, then work with your partner who will be able to take you through some pricing combinations. Abid, back to you.
Thank you so much, Mike. A follow-up question to that I think is interesting is that, and this is Mike, this is for you as well, is there any particular guidance on how to route F SKU versus E SKU license considerations for people who are working remotely from home but are in first-line scenarios?
That's another great question that we are looking at as well right now. We have seen a few instances of customers in certain industries and certain types of markets. I'm familiar of a few customer cases I know of in countries like India, where there are unique cases where a first-line profile in a financial services industry might be working from home. We don't have a solution right now that is programmatic and available to all our customers. But the way we are dealing with this is we are working based on what the customer situation is, again through the managed Microsoft account teams, and looking at the situation to make sure that we are ensuring that we are providing the right set of remote work capabilities, whether it's an information worker or a first-line worker. That's
great. Thanks, Mike. Natasha asked a really interesting question, Zoe, that I'm going to probably pass to you, and I think it's an interesting one that we probably have had conversations about as well, which is, how do you motivate and prompt technology engagement from a workforce that's resistant to quote unquote more tools, or is not comfortable with digital tools, for example, like an older workforce? How do you go about motivating them to actually get involved in these and engage?
Yeah, it's really important, because if you don't engage someone, they're clearly not going to want to get on the platform, and then it makes it useless. There's a few different ways. One is building a product that's simple and intuitive. So something that anyone can pick up, look at, and say, oh, I get it. I see what I'm supposed to do. And within that, it's about the connection to the rest of their coworkers. Especially right now, it's really hard to have a better connection, have constant communication, be able to praise each other. No more high fives on the shop floor. And so one thing that we've really seen on top of having that simple product is really driving that connection between coworkers and using that as the reason to want to get on. Part of the beauty of Teams too is it's that all-in-one app. So unlike, where we have one app for shifts, one app for tasks, one app for etc., it's all in one. And so it kind of reduces at least the barrier to saying, oh, I don't want to download, 5 different applications for work. It's all in one and very simple, and connects you with the people who, you want to work with and who you need to, know what's going on. We also have this really cool ability. I know sometimes it's hard to get people on initially onto Teams. We have code sharing. So a manager, say, can create a little QR code, and however they want to share that with the team, it's an easy way for a worker to just, scan it on their phone and immediately get set up with the right team channel. And that way it reduces the barrier on the manager to even get people into the right discussion together. So those are the main tactics I would use to kind of engage and create a culture of excitement about being able to connect with each other and, have a simpler job, have more access.
Great. There's so many good questions coming through here. Thanks so much, Zoe. Another question that's come up that I think is interesting is related to how we use WalkieTalkie in the field. Someone has brought up a question about WalkieTalkie and shifts, and Zoe, maybe I think you and I can probably work on this one together. So will it be possible to use shifts, tasks, or WalkieTalkie with guests inside of a tenant? Many times we have external providers that by policy can have an account with us, but need to have access to both apps to be productive. So I know, so go ahead, Zoe.
Oh, so in terms of, I think it's the guest access capability.
Guest access.
Yes. So it's a bit hard. We do have conditional access kind of set up that would allow people into our environment. It's a great question that I think is something we need to circle on. It's not actually a scenario I've seen a ton of. Mostly I've seen it from, seasonality of workers and things like that. Abid, do you have an example where you've seen guest access usage?
Not for WalkieTalkie. That's the one thing that we would need to also kind of do some homework on to figure out if that's something that we can do. But I see the question has a lot of merit because that's a scenario that I see a lot happen often. So let's see here. Going on to the next question that we've got. There's so many coming through. Let me make sure that I've covered the right bases here. So here's an interesting question. So I'm going to pose this question to Lindsay. Can you discuss how Firstline and Frontline workers utilize the Microsoft 365 stack when they're offline? Oftentimes, frontline workers have to work in areas where there's zero or very minimal internet coverage.
Ooh, I'm going to have to defer this one. I just want to make sure I do this question justice. I am going to have to defer this to either Mayank or Zoe, who are the product specialists on my team.
Mayank.
Yeah, I can take the question. I think I recall having a similar question in the session we had this morning. We will have to follow up through our blog. I know there's a couple of questions where we probably don't have the best response for you in this forum. It's a very specialized question because I think if you're going into details on like 4G connectivity versus Wi-Fi, or if you're talking about like spotty access versus no access. So there's different network topologies, like especially if you get into like a Teams deployment or a Teams network architecture discussion. So it'll be hard to do justice to this question in a very short duration. So what we will do is we will publish some guidance on the network topology guide infrastructure for solutions like WalkieTalkie, which I think was also the essence of the previous question on the guest access. So yeah, I'll probably have to take that as a follow-up, Abid.
Great. One thing I would want to mention is that you do have the ability with the 365 suite of apps to work offline and then synchronize once you're back into an online connected area. And so that way you can still operate and do work on Teams, for example, in a remote environment. We've seen it happen with oil rigs and remote sites where there's no interconnectivity, but people are able to work and then resync on their information once they're back online. But let's move on to the next question here. So in terms of thinking about, here's an interesting question I'm going to answer myself, actually. So folks here, the anonymous question says that we're using RealWear, but we were wondering how to compare this to HoloLens for similar tasks. So this is an interesting question that comes up often, and it's a really interesting one because when you think about HoloLens and the RealWear HMT1 device, you realize that they're complementary to each other in the purpose-built design that they both are designed for, where HoloLens is designed for one part of the overall supply chain in terms of training and remote assist, and RealWear and the HMT1 device are designed for a different part of the workflow environment. And so they exist in the same universe and can be complementary to each other. Let's see here. Okay, so are there any insights you can share for leading with Surface Go stories with first-line worker profiles, especially in emerging markets? I'm going to take this one myself and respond by saying that there are some interesting public safety and public response use cases where we've seen Surface Go be used by municipal governments in APAC, for example, and we can follow up offline to be able to use the Surface Go as a portable kiosk mode computer for being able to do frontline and first line related tasks. And that's one of the major cases that we're seeing for Surface Go with a first line attach. Let's see here. Okay, here's one question for Mayank. For first-line worker compete scenarios, what would be your guidance to lead with platform story or to focus on industry use cases? Because pricing often is a concern.
Yeah, so if I understand the question well, because the whole notion on compete is like I like to look at this from a customer standpoint. On like if I look at a customer and what our customer is trying to accomplish, we see two different ways in which it works. There is a strong IT pull for first line solutions, especially when you think about things like identity and security, which drives a lot of our IT pros to look at the Microsoft 365 solution. And then with respect to the industry use cases and the business users looking at our first line solutions, it is very closely tied to the nature of the industry. So it happens a lot, depending on, again, I don't know where the question is coming from, but if you are a customer who is in the retail or manufacturing industry, as an example, we do see some of our customers having a strong correlation between certain industry outcomes that they're trying to drive, and then how they measure their productivity or business workflow throughput from the workforce. So there is a strong correlation on how the pull gets treated from the line of business as well. So it's a combination. It could be an IT pull or it could be a line of business pull. But in the first line space, we do see a lot of business owners and business decision makers who are interested to either optimize or streamline a certain business process and are looking at a solution like Microsoft 365. Abid, back to you.
Thanks so much. This is an interesting question here as well that I find it comes up in thinking about the way that Teams offers different types of notifications. Zoe, I'll pass this one to you. What is the difference between a priority notification and a shift-based notification?
Yeah, so a priority notification is when you go into kind of you're typing out a message, you're hitting on the ellipsis, and you're able to change the message based on either important, so it has a little exclamation point and a banner, or urgent, depending on if your environment allows for this. It will ping someone every 20 minutes until they respond. So that's what priority messaging is. Tagging by shifts is actually based on a tag that's aware of whether that worker is on shift or off shift. And that's based on our shifts application, which you don't need to actively be using shifts in order for this to work, but you just need their shifts data, whether it's backed by a workforce management system or manually input. And what happens then is when you @mention someone, it goes straight to only the people who are on shift. So the main difference is that one is a attention grabber conversation for messaging, and the other one is more targeted toward someone who's actually on shift, and therefore you know that they'll receive it.
Awesome. A question that came up earlier and that I think it just came up in a different forum, and Lindsay, I'll pass this to you, is how do you deal with employee-owned first-line devices that you want to use on the company network?
Okay, I may need to rely on some of my colleagues here. Is this question posed around kind of security and compliance concerns?
That's right.
Okay. Yes, Mike, I will ask you to step in here. My esteemed product expert.
So if the question is on how do you deal with, we can definitely support both employee-owned devices, which is like the classic like BYOD, versus devices that are actually owned by the company. which end up being the shared devices. So we have options for both. The question is specific on a BYOD strategy versus a shared device strategy. There are some dependencies on the underlying MDM strategy that you may have, especially when it comes to shared devices with Intune versus a non-Intune device. And we have a couple of announcements that we have just released this week. So what I will do is I'll also point the link, which I think I've done once before, but I'll repoint it to the announcements from Ignite from yesterday, which do detail a little bit on device management, especially with some of the announcements coming from our partners such as Samsung and Klein.
Great, thanks, Mayank. We've got just a few minutes left here, and I wanted to just pose a question to each of you to respond to, which is we in our day-to-day at Microsoft get to see so many different examples of digital transformation in action across all of our different customer types. I would love to hear if you've got a particular first line digital transformation story from a different customer from across the different spectrum that we've got that you'd love to highlight maybe here. Zoe, I'll pass it to you to start with.
Sure, yeah. So I think one of our favorites is Alcoa, which is a manufacturing plant. What I love about the story is that it is a combination of the IT person being a hero in the moment of when the Firstline workers needed it. We had worked a lot with them before COVID, and then when COVID hit, they were faced with some huge issues of changing their shifts from 8 hours to 12-hour shifts, making sure they had the right communication to clean everything in between the shifts and have contactless hands-off. And what I loved about that story is they never gave up. They never felt like they could make it through it together, and that our tools help them feel connected, whether it was in that way of making sure shifts are right and communication right, and they also just using our tools to, share what their day is like right now and make sure that their well-being is taken care of. So I think Alcoa is my favorite customer story because it goes beyond just changing operations to actually helping people stay connected. Thanks,
Zoe. And Mayank, what about you?
Well, let's take a different one. A story that really comes to my head is from our partner, which is RealWear. I think we had a couple of discussions in this forum. There's one that we just spoke about in the keynote by Satya, which is on Honeywell and how Honeywell in the US is using the RealWear head-mounted devices for really running their factory operations more efficiently, especially in these times when physical interactions are becoming really hard. RealWear also had a customer story that they published a couple of weeks back from another manufacturing company, Total, from a French oil company, which was really awesome. They had a pretty detailed a video as well on their website where it was really about like Total using the RealWear technology with Microsoft 365 and Teams for Firstline Workers to really bring in their French colleagues to help in machine maintenance type of scenarios for their factories in Houston and Texas. So that is something again that sticks out as wow, like these are some amazing use cases of digital transformation and how our technologies along with our partner solutions are really helping our customers to solve some of these business problems. Back to you, Abid.
Great. And Lindsay, I know that you had talked about a couple of different stories, but which one comes to mind?
I'd love to highlight Hilton Grand Vacations. And so this was a new story that we just published this week. And what's unique about this experience for Hilton is they had to make the difficult decision to shut down operations. And so Teams really was instrumental in how they reopened operations and also really created that employee connection where employees felt empowered and safe as they return to work with this new normal. And so, in these unprecedented times that are kind of scary, Hilton really did an exemplary job of how they managed this, responded, and kind of reoriented their business model moving forward for their own kind of business continuity and success.
You guys are on a tear. We went through all of our questions, it seems. We have, I think, we're right on time as well. I want to thank our panel here, Zoe, Lindsay, Mayank, for the great responses and for all your expertise today. I wanted to close out by just bringing to attention some resources and a few calls to action. Definitely urge the audience to check out the Firstline Virtual Hub page to learn about all of the learn about all the Firstline sessions at Ignite this week, as well as check out some resources that we've put on screen here, including a Harvard Business Review white paper on empowering Firstline workers. Now, the way you get to these is by going to the links you see below each of our bullet points, aka.ms/firstlinehbr for the white paper, aka.ms/firstline sessions for the virtual hub, and then the rest of the resources you can see on screen. Lindsay, Zoe, Mayank, thank you so much again for your time today, and you guys enjoy the rest of your Ignite week.